Okay, everyone, I am back. I now want to dive into Clayton Kershaw. Clayton Kershaw, to me, is the greatest pitcher of my lifetime. I'm talking about the last, 15 to 20 years. And Clayton Kershaw is arguably one of the 5 greatest pitchers to ever play the game of baseball. He's already in that category, to me at least. Or at least he should be in the conversation. We can debate whether or not he's a top 5 pitcher of all time. I do believe he will, without a doubt, probably be at least a consensus top 5 pitcher, of all time once it's all said and done amongst, the mainstream media and people who follow baseball. They'll probably consider him a top 5 pitcher of all time. He's that special, okay? Now, throughout Clayton Kershaw's 14-year career, he has been an all-star 8 times. He's won the pitching triple crown back in 2011. He won that award. He's won a gold glove. He's led the league in ERA 5 times. He's a 3-time Cy Young Award winner, which is pretty much the MVP for pitchers every year. And only 4 other pitchers have won more Cy Young Awards than Clayton Kershaw. And not to mention, Clayton Kershaw also won an MVP back in 2014, which is very tough to do for a pitcher. We talk about, there's so many great hitters in the game of baseball. It is really, really hard for you to win an MVP award as a starting pitcher, okay? And at the time, people were considering Clayton Kershaw potentially as one of, if not the best player in all baseball. I didn't quite think he was that good, but you could have at least made the argument back then that, yeah, even though he's a pitcher, that guy's the best player in the sport, at least at that time. And the crazy thing is, I believe Clayton Kershaw has at least another 5 to 7 good to great seasons left in him. Now, the question is, what is holding Clayton Kershaw back from arguably being the greatest pitcher who's ever lived? And, people are wondering, why is he not quite mentioned with Sandy Koufax? Why is he not quite Bob Gibson? A big reason why is because, there's been a lot of good pitchers throughout history, for one, okay? And number 2, when it matters most in the postseason, the mud is at times a little bit foggy for Clayton Kershaw. The clouds and the mud, they get a little bit foggy, And to me, Clayton Kershaw is the Peyton Manning of Major League Baseball. And that's not a knock against Clayton Kershaw at all. Because anytime you're considered in the conversation with Peyton Manning, okay, that means you're all-time great. Because Peyton Manning, I know we're talking about different sports right here, but Peyton Manning, as far as him in the National Football League, he won 5 MVP awards. He's got 538 career touchdown passes, over 70,000 passing yards, and he won 2 Super Bowls throughout his career. And Clayton Kershaw this past year in the 2020 World Series, he got the monkey off his back. And and the way he got the monkey off his back is he actually, came out in the postseason and he put together a really good performance. In the playoffs this past year for the Dodgers, Clayton Kershaw went 4-1 as a starter, had an ERA of 2.93, had 37 strikeouts to only 5 walks, and he won 2 crucial games as a starting pitcher for the Dodgers in the World Series. Okay, so, a couple of years back, people were saying Clayton Kershaw, he's a choker, he's a no good postseason pitcher, he'll never get over to the hump, he's the reason the Dodgers are losing. That monkey is off of Clayton Kershaw's back. You can never call a Super Bowl champion, an NBA champion, or a World Series champion, in my opinion at least, a choker. That is gone from Clayton Kershaw's reputation. But just because you get the monkey off your back in one postseason, that doesn't mean you completely erased all of your postseason struggles. See, just because Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl MVP and won a second Super Bowl in Denver, in which he was pretty much carried by his defense, that doesn't take away the fact that Peyton Manning, throughout most of his postseason career, he was often a lesser version of himself. And before Peyton Manning was carried by the Denver Broncos defense, on his way to winning his second Super Bowl, Peyton Manning was 10-12 in the playoffs. Now, he finished his postseason career with a 13-12 record, but ironically, you know who also has a 13-2 record in their career in the playoffs? Clayton Kershaw. I know it's a different sport, but Peyton Manning went 13-12 in his postseason career. Meanwhile, Clayton Kershaw, as we speak today, he's got a 13-12 postseason career. To be very clear, both guys went 13-12 during their postseason careers. And obviously Kershaw can add to that because his career is not over. But when you look at Peyton Manning, during his time in the playoffs, his passer rating went down dramatically. His completion percentage went down dramatically. His touchdown and interception ratio wasn't the same. You can say the same thing for Clayton Kershaw. Clayton Kershaw's ERA in the postseason is 4.19. To put that in context, his career ERA in the regular season is not even at 2.5. It's at like 2.47. That's pretty astonishing. And it's hard to be the same version. It's hard to be a better version of yourself from that in the regular season. But even then, isn't that kind of how and why we separate guys on these all-time lists in the first place? Like, the postseason has to matter. And we have to take into account the fact that Clayton Kershaw in the playoffs, more times than not, usually was a lesser version of himself. There are some guys in the playoffs in the high leverage moments that stay the same under pressure, that elevate under pressure, or shrink under pressure. Clayton Kershaw, for the most part, this past postseason, stayed about the same under pressure. You know, he didn't elevate to a new level, which is very hard to do, but he at least was sort of a normal version of himself, okay? But he wasn't quite transcendent. And that's always going to be the knock on Clayton Kershaw throughout his career is, yes, he's an all-time great in the regular season, arguably one of the 5 greatest pitchers of all time in the regular season. And while we can say he's a champion, he's not quite Bob Gibson. He's not quite, Sandy Koufax. He's not in the conversation of guys that, okay, Game 7, you need a starting pitcher on the mound to get Barry Bonds out, to get Derek Jeter out, to get David Ortiz out, to get Ken Griffey Jr. out. He's not in that conversation. In fact, I'd rather have Madison Bumgarner on the mound in the playoffs when it matters most over Clayton Kershaw. And Clayton Kershaw right now is a better all-time pitcher than Madison Bumgarner, but when it matters most, give me Madison Bumgarner. He's shown he can be an elevated version of himself when it matters most. And that elevated version of himself is just as nasty as Clayton Kershaw. Postseason Madison Bumgarner is better than postseason Clayton Kershaw. So look, all I'm trying to say is, I'm not trying to criticize Clayton Kershaw too much, but the reason why Peyton Manning is not quite the greatest quarterback of all time when he should be, by the way, because Peyton Manning was super talented. He won 5 MVPs. He carried a bunch of bad rosters to the playoffs at times. He was the ultimate leader and the ultimate coach on the field. You wonder, why is Peyton Manning not the greatest quarterback of all time? To me, he's a little bit more talented than Tom Brady even. You can make that argument at least, okay? But a big reason why is because Peyton Manning is not as great as Joe Montana in the playoffs. He was not as great as Tom Brady in the playoffs. He wasn't even quite as great as Eli Manning in the playoffs. That's the same thing with Clayton Kershaw. He's great in the regular season, arguably, top 5 at his position in the regular season, but when it matters most, at times he's hittable. At times he's very, very mortal. So that is the biggest reason why I believe Clayton Kershaw is the Peyton Manning of baseball. An all-time great player, but when it comes to the postseason, not quite always his cup of tea. But he's an all-time great, and he should be very proud of his career up to this point. And by the way, Clayton Kershaw can still add on to his resume, which is the scary thing. Will he continue to be great in the playoffs? Only time will tell. Thank you so much for watching this video today. Please also note that the Juiciest Sports Podcast is not just a YouTube channel. It is available on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this content with all your friends. This podcast is my favorite thing in the entire world right now. It is my passion. And I want more people to listen to this podcast. I really want this podcast to grow. Also, a fun fact about me is that I want to go into the sports broadcasting and media world once I graduate from the University of Toledo, a college in Northern Ohio. I am looking to become one of the next great sports broadcasters and analysts out in the world. And I potentially would like to start my own network if this podcast really truly grows. Or if I fall short of that goal, I would love to work for a big time network like ESPN or Fox Sports 1. I am open to all networks. So if you believe in my dreams and you see or hear my passion through the screen, be sure to tell all your friends about the Juiciest Sports Podcast. Stay motivated, you guys. Have a God bless day, and I'm out.